Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 7 of our course on Jewish life in Western Europe before Hitler, 1492 or so to about 1939. This week, we're going to be talking about the area of religious reform and counter-reform in 19th century Germany. This is one of my areas of expertise and particular interest. I think our extensive discussion on Rachel Varnhagen really sets the stage very well for this discussion. Now, the papers are due, and I'll be looking for them. You can send them to me by attachment. And I look forward to reading them, and also, of course, we'll be discussing them together as a class next week. I will work out a methodology as to how we can do that. If any of you have experience in how this is done, please send me a note, and I'll consider that. And I would say once I have all the papers in, or the majority in, and have looked at a few and have a sense of things, we'll make the final determination. I'll also check with Deborah Aaron at Gratz as the best way to do this, as again I am learning with you as to how this format actually works the best. I'm going to plan to go for about 20 minutes. Class was about evenly divided between those on the one hand who either preferred 30 minutes or had no opinion, which means 30 minutes is okay, and those who feel the time crunch for all types of different reasons. We're a small but diverse group, and I'm going to try to compromise somewhere in the middle around 20 minutes as best I can. Now, when we talk about religious reform, it's a complex topic. I think we need to realize that there's reform with a small r and reform with a big R. Reform with a small r is constant, and it takes place all the time, even within traditional Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, and more or less those branches of Judaism recognize that as well. There's a famous Agadah, rabbinic legend, about Rabbi Akiba. That was actually about Moses asking what happened to his Torah, and God says, turn around, and Moses finds himself in the back of the academy of Rabbi Akiba with 20,000 students, and he is articulating the meaning of all the different tiny little marks on tops of the letters in the Torah. And Moses says to God, if you had a man like that, a person like that, who knew Torah, why'd you pick me to be the one to deliver it to Israel? And God, of course, says, well, that's my business. What that Agadah shows is that there is an awareness that Torah, Judaism, has developed over time, that it's been adaptive. And within Orthodoxy, there are mechanisms for adaptation. But in Europe, in particular, in the Napoleonic age and thereafter, there came a moment when not only the rate of change, but the depth of change was greatly increased. And the change included not only modification of practice or discussion about traditional belief from within, but a call really went up for a profound change in the practice of Judaism, along with philosophical justification, to the point where early reform called itself Reformed Judaism, past tense, indicating that something new was beginning to take place. That actually is an ongoing ideological debate within Reform. To what extent is it continuous with the rabbinic past in particular, and to what extent does it represent something that is new and to some extent unprecedented. And it is an unresolved issue. Today in Reform, they prefer the idea of reform as a verb, that Judaism is always reforming itself, and that there isn't some huge gap between Reform Judaism and the Judaism that preceded it. My feeling is that there was a structural change, that halakha as the guiding mechanism of Jewish life was overthrown by Reform, and it replaces halakha with something called principles, that is, guiding ideas, as opposed to a methodology of law. And in the area of belief, I believe in early Reform, the idea of a Jewish nation was largely rejected and then again restored in what might be called neo-Reform. A total rejection of anything dealing with the priests of ancient Israel in ancient times, and even more so with respect to the rebuilding of a third temple in Jerusalem. Everything that could be gained from the ancient sacrificial order was reinterpreted in a spiritual way, so that, for example, one of the most important Reform prayer books in this country, a German Hebrew book, Olat Tamid by David Einhorn, uses the language of sacrifice, the eternal sacrifice, but prayer has replaced animal and grain sacrifice. So Reform, in my opinion, has elements of continuity, but it also does have element of something new and discontinuity. The particular moment in which Reform, with a capital R, emerges is really in response to our now new friend Rachel Varnhagen, and a sense of unhappiness with Jewishness, a sense of disconnection from Judaism among the elite of German Jews beginning around the year 1810. And it was the search for an alternative to assimilation, a search to the alternative to assimilation and loss of Jewish identity. Instead of giving up Jewishness and giving up Judaism, why not change it in a way in which the core of Judaism is still acknowledged, is still heartfelt, but at the same time one could remain within the Jewish fold. Now, the first instance of this, ironically, is in the Kingdom of Westphalia, which is the kingdom created by Napoleon for his brother Jerome, and it had something to do with the creation of a French-style consistory in Westphalia, the Confederation of the Rhine, in which Jewish life was going to be state-managed, and the leader of the consistory, of the consistoire, was a German Jew, but a Francophile, who wanted to reshape the Judaism that he was responsible for as a government official in the image of contemporary cosmopolitan European culture. So in 1810, and actually for a few years before that, Israel Jacobson creates a school, actually several different programs. And then in July of 1810, at a ceremony of dedication for his school's chapel, which becomes the prototype of a Reform synagogue, he holds a confirmation service. The internal architecture has been changed to create a central access instead of having the pulpit in the middle, which is the case in traditional synagogue architecture, and an organ is installed. Much of the service is read in German. So decorum, architecture, organ music are all part of Jacobson's package for his school in the Westphalian town of Sazen. Moreover, the service was called confirmation. a word that is borrowed from Christian practice. It's one of the sacraments, and it was meant in 1810 to replace the bar mitzvah. Bar mitzvah, being a halachic category, is nationalistic. And confirmation is based on affirming religious principles, so it's religious community, but not a political statement about being Jewish, although I'm sure most little bar mitzvah boys don't think about what they're doing in terms of political statements, but it is a kind of affirmation of a Jewish legal system and therefore of Jewish nationhood. In the following year, 1811, they realized it had nothing to do with halakha and nothing to do with reading Torah. Then perhaps girls could be part of the process, and it really was quite revolutionary. It wasn't until years later that confirmation aligns itself with the holiday of Shavuot and the giving of Torah. Initially it was in July, and eventually it would move back. The experiment in Samson fails with the fall of the Westphalian kingdom. You have the Great Reaction of 1815, the Congress of Vienna, and many European statements, now assuming the statist model of Francis' consistoire system, are nervous that Reform Judaism is closer in spirit to the liberalism from before the time of the Congress of Vienna, and become somewhat skeptical about it. The upper-class Jews, on the other hand, turn to it more and more as a mechanism for cultural accommodation. A few years later, in 1818, a Reform Society develops in Hamburg, Germany, and like the first one, begins to evoke negative responses from the more traditional community, and a kind of three-way battle begins to develop between reformers, the traditionalists, and the state, because the state has its hand in the governance of religion in Europe during this time, and actually still to this day. And it's quite a pitched battle for years. Largely the traditionalists have the upper hand because the government felt in general that they would be more cooperative with conservative elements in the body politic as opposed to the reformers, who tended to be more liberal. Reform immediately develops different strands, not only locations. It jumps from Samson to Hamburg and eventually to Berlin, but different strands of reform develop. Some are quite radical. In Frankfurt, in Berlin, there are lay groups that are saying that the Talmud no longer has any authority at all over Jewish life, that we don't need the Hebrew language for Jews, that the Sabbath can be moved from Saturday to Sunday to accommodate calendar needs, that circumcision is not required. And within the Reform community, different groups began to form between what I would call the ultra-radicals, who were mostly lay people, let's call them the high radicals, the low radicals, or middle group, who become known as the radical rabbis, and then the moderate reformers. The most important person in these discussions was Rabbi Abraham Geiger, who was both yeshiva trained and had a PhD from a German university, a fact which evoked the negative comment when when rabbis became doctors, Judaism became sick. And the reply to that would be, when Judaism became sick, rabbis became doctors. And there were pitched battles, for example, in the city of Breslau. Today it's Wrocław in Poland, and the reformers led by Abraham Geiger. Geiger had two sets of teachings that are critical here. The first of the three main theological principles of reform. The first is ethical monotheism, which is influenced by Kant, which says there is a God who expects that the way we honor God is to behave with one another. The second is progressive revelation, that the Torah wasn't just given at Sinai, but that the Torah is mediated by culture over time. The Torah is highly adaptive. Third, the mission of Israel. The mission of Israel is for the Jews to be a witness to the one God and an or l'goyim, a light to the nations. That is why many early Reform synagogues are called Emmanuel, which means God is with us. That these are the people who are going to bear truth, witness truth about the one God. The mission of Israel in particular answers the question, in an age of conversion out of Judaism, why be Jewish? And the answer is we're Jewish because our ancestors were the first to recognize monotheism as religious truth, and that we are the bearers of that tradition, and we alone are responsible for being its vanguard. The rabbis who were with Geiger, a little to his left and a little to his right, meet in a series of conferences beginning in the 1840s in Frankfurt, in Breslau, and a place called Brunswick in English, Braunschweig in German, to debate some of these big issues of the day among the Reform camp in German Jewry. At one of the conferences, one of the more moderate Reform rabbis, a man by the name of Dr. Zacharias Frankel, takes exception with Abraham Geiger on the question of Hebrew. Frankel felt that there needs to be more Hebrew left in the Jewish prayer service than what Geiger was proposing. He also challenged Geiger on the grounds that if Judaism is going to change, and he agreed Judaism must change, it had to do so through the halakha, that any modernization, whether it's an elimination of a tradition or we're creating something new, had to be developed along the same lines of halakha, Jewish law, rabbinic law, as had been the case for centuries beforehand. Zacharias Frankel attracted followers, and in 1854 sets up the Jewish Theological Seminary, that is the first JTS in Breslau in Germany, to train rabbis along the lines he was proposing, that is, very, very moderate reform, which he called positive historical Judaism. Eventually, both reform, high radical and low radical, as well as positive historical Judaism, will all transplant itself here in the United States. Many years later, about 1902, Solomon Schechter called this positive historical approach the Catholic approach to Judaism, Catholic Israel, and that the Judaism that they were practicing might best be called conservative Judaism because it sought to conserve in places where reform sought to break. So, in essence, the reform movement spawns the conservative movement, first in Germany and then in other places. What complicates that story, of course, is that here in America, conservative Judaism becomes highly attractive in the middle of the 20th century to Jews of East European descent, and after a while it's assumed that conservative Judaism is a form of East European traditionalism, when in fact it is a form of Central European reformism, later modified to adapt for the East European Jews coming to America. Of course, there were yet other objections to the reform, particularly of Abraham Geiger, the most important of which was articulated by Rabbi Samuel Hirsch, Raphael Hirsch, Samson Raphael Hirsch, who says that you can change Judaism halachically, but the one thing you cannot change is the idea that Judaism is grounded in God, that the Torah was God-given, Torah Misinai. And that belief, that doctrine of the Torah being of completely divine origin, earned Samson Raphael Hirsch's position the label of Orthodox Judaism, or maybe better, modern Judaism or neo-Orthodox Judaism, with a special emphasis on doctrine. Today, Orthodoxy is distinguished more by orthopraxis, by the correct way of doing things as opposed to the correct way of thinking about things. But Hirsch wanted to make sure that the anchor was still down in the seabed, holding the ship of Judaism in place, with the idea of a supernatural revelation to Moses. On the other hand, he too wanted to see Judaism adapt itself to new cultural standards, and he phrases his cultural changes as Torah im derech eretz, Torah with contemporary culture. That is, one could be a believing, practicing Orthodox Jew, and at the same time a full cultural and political citizen of modern Germany, that the two can be reconciled with one another. One does not have to give up one's belief in God or the divine origins of the Torah. One can continue to keep kosher. Hirsch, like others, would have said, look, German is as good as any other language with respect to daily conversation and business, but the business of the synagogue itself should be conducted in Hebrew, in the original language. What all this means is by the 1830s and 1840s, you're beginning to see a three-track approach to Judaism in Central and Western Europe. You have the different tracks of reform. You have the positive, historical, conservative in the middle, and then your neo-Orthodox. All will transplant themselves here to the United States. For much of the 20th century, the conservative position was dominant in America. Somewhere in the late 20th century, 1980s, 1990s, the reform position in this discussion becomes dominant, and it is still probably statistically the largest, but has many structural problems. Today, we're seeing a resurgent orthodoxy, but ironically not the modern orthodoxy of Samson Raphael Hirsch, but rather to its right, the Litvish and the Hasidic kind of orthodoxy that emanates more from East Europe than the kind of modern westernized orthodoxy that came out of Central Europe. So we have limited readings on our topic in the textbook by Josh Halo. It's only pages 285 to 293. There is more to read in the Mendes Fleur Reader. It is chapter 4. You could take a look literally at all of the documents there, at least a little bit of each, and their apparatus that they have with them, their footnotes, and we should have a good sense then of the movement toward religious adaptation and how to attract the people like Rachel Varnhagen, who did not have a home in traditional Judaism. Looking down the road, in week 8, we'll be talking about ways of doing student presentations that you can share your essays with one another, and then from there we'll take the voyage across the Atlantic to America. So I've already talked longer than I had hoped. I hope you enjoy this presentation and your readings, and I do look forward to reading more of your thoughts, although I believe I've gotten to know many of you quite well from your contributions to our forum. Take care, and see you soon.